Good morning, guys. How's everyone doing today? Good. Good morning.
Good morning. Your Excellency, the Vice President of Mauritius, distinguished guests, our corporate ticket holders, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. Welcome and thank you for joining us for day 2 of the LSE Africa Summit. The better day, of course. Day 2 is always the better day.
Yes.
I'm Maudo Jallo. I'm from the Gambia.
And I'm Gadir Mansour, and I'm from Egypt. And we are the co-directors of today's business conference.
We didn't rehearse that, I promise.
In its 4th year, the LSE Africa Summit continues to be a forum for debate and lively discussion about the myriad of issues, interests, and innovations of the African continent. And
so the theme, Built for Africa. What does this mean? African solutions to African issues. Well, we set out to explore how we, as Africans, can take charge of our own history, our own debates, our own ideology, and our own destiny.
And the business conference is human ingenuity in the flesh. And what I mean by that is it brings together women and men who are the economic agents and the movers and shapers of our interconnected world. And of course, worth a lot of money. So for those who were here yesterday, we're glad that Tim's stories didn't scare you away.
And for those who just joined us today, you just missed out on a very good inside joke. Headlining the business conference today are 2 of the most influential women on the continent who truly need no introduction. Mrs. Ibukun Awoshika of Nigeria. And Miss Isabel dos Santos, who will be joining us later on in the day.
And with the unique contributions of the diverse and exceptional speakers, together we will all be discussing the complexities of improving Africa's service economy, rethinking Africa's trade policies, bridging Africa's finance gap, and of course, philanthropy's roles in mitigating inequality.
So, Biko, unlike the research conference, we encourage everybody in the audience to share your views, whether evidence-based or not. We will not judge you. It's all right.
All right. And to our guests in the audience, it is our honor and privilege to host you. Just a few housekeeping points, guys. First off, everyone please slide towards the center of the rows away from the aisles for those who are still to join us. There are 4 fire exits, those towards the front of the room, there's one to the right and left, and to the back of the room, also on both sides of the room. At the end of each talk, please stay seated until our speakers make their way out of the auditorium first, and ushers, of course, will be at the doors for everyone's assistance.
So to kick things off, we would like you to join us in welcoming someone to the stage. He is the director of the Ferris Lauji Center for Africa at the LSE. He's the head of the Department of International Development here at the LSE.
He's an advisor to the summit. Please give a round of applause for the ever charismatic and insightful Professor Tim Allen.
Well, they've said everything I was going to say. I was going to tell you my name and what I did. Yeah. So I'll tell you my Brexit story. I was climbing a mountain in the Congo last summer with 2 really big, beefy guys holding Kalashnikov rifles. They were saying it was to protect us from the guerrillas, but I think it's because they liked carrying the rifles. And as they were climbing up the mountain, they were going in a language I didn't understand, Brexit. And then the other one went, oh, Brexit. And then Brexit. And they went on and on about Brexit. And my daughter was with me, and she said, Daddy, why are they talking about Brexit in Congo? So eventually I said to them, what are your views on Brexit? And then one of them turned to me and said, you know her? There's nothing like going to Africa to put life in perspective, huh? Yeah, there's a lesson there. Look, this is fantastic to have you all here today in the 4th Africa Summit we've held at the LSE. As I said yesterday, we've come such a long way. When we first started out on this journey a few years ago, the African Initiative at the LSE, there was a tiny number of Africans studying at the LSE, but there was over 100 academics working on Africa. There was a very strange anomaly. Back in the 1960s and 70s, LSE was right at the center of education in Africa. In fact, the American Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan once referred to LSE as Africa's leading university. Nkrumah was here, Kenyatta was here, so many of the architects of what we think of as modern Africa studied here. But that was lost in the 1970s. When I first came to the LSE, I was teaching about Africa, but there were almost no Africans. So we're changing that bit by bit. We now have some 60 Africans as part of the program for African leadership. We have ever-growing numbers of African applicants, and we're engaging more and more in outreach across different parts of Africa, from South Africa to Sierra Leone, to Liberia, to Uganda. We're working closely with some of the elite institutions in Africa, but maybe we're a bit unusual, a bit different, in that this university is one of the very few universities in the world where we do serious research in the really difficult places. In the parts of Africa people don't generally study. So we have a very strong commitment to work with Gulu University right up on the border between Uganda and South Sudan, in the region affected by the war with the Lord's Resistance Army. We're now setting up a very strong relationship with Njala University, which was right at the epicenter of the Ebola epidemic in Sierra Leone, trying to build up those institutions, working with them. As I mentioned yesterday, people talk to me very often about, your role is capacity development in Africa. And when I apply for grants, I have to put things about capacity development. But, frankly, my own agenda is a rather different one. I actually think that capacity development here at the LSE, from my point of view as a British academic here at this institution, is as much my priority. We have to change the way that Africa is studied. We have to put Africa in the curriculum in a different way. Somebody very pertinently yesterday pointed out that we don't have very many African authors on our reading list. That has to change. We have to think about these things in a different way. And it's partly ignorance. There are Africans who write great things, but it's partly a problem in Africa with people writing in ways that find their way into the international arena. One of the things we're working on very seriously at the moment is building up a relationship with African scholars and working with them to get their articles in top journals, because then, unfortunately, maybe they get noticed, not just here, but in the United States and globally. We have to begin to change the way that the debate occurs, and this is part of that. So I don't really have a lot more to say. I could go on and on, as I was doing yesterday. If we have a gap today, I will continue the story of my life. But what I'm going to do now, is welcome the first panel to come up. I hope today we can try not to go so far over time as we did. I think we were about an hour late by the end of the day yesterday, but we'll try and keep time a bit today. But would you like to come and join us for the first panel, Mr. Siegfried, introduce? And this is about service delivery. Actually, service delivery is something I've been working on a great deal in Africa over the last few years. Would you like to all come up now? Yeah. And I think this is an arena, I'd just like to kind of throw this in as a kind of question before they start, in a way, is that over the past 5 years, I've been working on the largest global health program that the world has ever seen, which is the mass deworming of for parasites in Africa. A massive, massive program, with drug companies providing tablets free of charge and billions of medications being distributed across Africa. There's very little sort of publicity about it. How many of you are aware of these mass drug administration programs in Africa? Few of you, yeah. These are absolutely massive operations. The evidence from the ground is that most poor people don't take the tablets. There's evidence from ethnographic work that they don't for all sorts of reasons. There's evidence from biologists that the diseases that are being targeted are not dropping, the prevalence rates are not dropping in the way that was anticipated. And Cochrane Review assessments looking at random control trials suggest that the programs are not working. Yet the World Health Organization has reinvigorated funding for these programs. DFID is supporting them. Recently, the UK minister once again threw the weight of the ministry behind these programs. They're still being held up as the way forward, even for alleviating poverty in Africa. The evidence is that they don't work. So here's my question. Why is it that with service delivery in Africa, perhaps more than anywhere in the world, evidence about what happens is pretty irrelevant? What's important is a good story about what might work. Africa seems to me a place where service delivery is driven by normative assumptions and an absence of evidence. Africa pioneered evidence-free policy, which we now see has taken over other parts of the world. Okay, over to the panel. Many thanks.
Right. Hello, good morning, everyone. Hope you are all happy to be here today, this morning. My name is Chimzulum Ezigbo. I am the founder of Think Home Initiative. I'm going to give an opportunity to the panelists to introduce themselves, but before we do that, just give you a brief outline of how this panel would run. They'll introduce themselves. We have some questions that I would ask them, and then I'll throw it out to the audience, and then we'll then summarize. So, but before we do that, I'll just give you some brief pointers on the African service economy and where we are right now. So our successes, how we're doing in terms of growth, and challenges that are possibly facing the African continent. So it's estimated that Africa's population would be about 2 billion by the year 2050. The service sector contributes to almost half of the continent's output at the moment. So Africa's service economy is growing at twice the average growth rate for the world, and that was between 2009 and 2012. The service economy of Africa is identified as the most important driver of growth in 30 out of 54 African countries. Africa's service exports and imports totaled at roughly $271 billion in 2012. However, Africa is still a marginal player in the global services trade, with about 4% in imports and 2.2% in exports in the market. And only about 11 African countries are net exporters of services. And these are countries like Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, South Africa, Mauritius, Egypt. And Egypt and South Africa, interestingly, being the top two but with a global share of less than 1%, actually just 0.49%, 0.49%. So we are getting there, but when you actually look at it and compare it to other climes, you'll find that we're literally just a drop in the ocean, and there's a lot that still needs to be done. So going to the panelists, Dean, if you can introduce yourself, the organization that you're coming from, and we'll take it from there. Thank you.
Right. I thank you very much, and it's good to be here. It's good to see amazing people who are doing great stuff and putting this together. My name is Derry Dindazi, and I work with Dreamable Limited. Dreamable is a startup made up of very bright young men and women like you, who are very passionate about tech, who are very innovative, and we are there helping businesses to bring more value to their customers. We are in the enterprise space. We build software for especially the banks to migrate them or to move them from their old technologies onto new technologies so that they can serve customers like you who are very sophisticated and who have a very compelling appetite for great services. So we provide the kind of technologies that they desire or they need to be able to deliver such services to you. We are also into the payment space. We have a payment platform called SlidePay that enables remittances, both from outside Ghana and then within Ghana. So we do domestic and international remittances, and we also enable the payment of bills and buying of airtime and doing things more conveniently and comfortably with money. So we are there not to create a cashless society, but we are there to make sure that the way you do your transactions are more seamless. You have more time to do the things that you love, whilst we take care of your transactional burdens. And if in the process we achieve a cashless society, we'll be a very happy team. Right, so that's what we do.
Thank you very much. Sylvia.
All right. Good morning. My name is Sylvia Mulinge. I am from Kenya, and I am Kenyan. I work for a company called Safaricom that is probably famous around the world for M-Pesa. I have been there for about 12 years and previously worked in Unilever. I'm passionate about interacting with young minds and young people because I believe that it takes one generation to change a nation, and that's one message that we are really trying to drive within Kenya. As we look to drive a more inclusive economy, we've been able to achieve a lot of gains with M-Pesa, and I'll probably be talking about some of those gains and how we can actually, as Africans, develop solutions for our continent that will inspire the world and continue to propel the continent forward. So thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you very much. Yep.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Kweku Osei. I'm from Ghana, and I'm a lawyer, but I'm not a terrible person, I promise. So I work at a place called Linklaters. I'm an associate in the Energy and Infrastructure Project Finance Department and a member of the Africa Group. So what we do is service banks, governments, and sponsors who are investing in the energy and infrastructure space. My practice focuses a lot on the continent and mainly in the energy space. Before working with Linklaters, I was at a tech incubator in Accra, working with startups who are trying to get to where Derry has got to, helping them source investments and to grow their companies. So that's me. The organization I'm with now, Linklaters, has been active on the continent for about 40 years now. and we service the different jurisdictions through our London, Paris, Lisbon offices, and currently have about 200 live matters on the continent. So we're very interested in the growth of the legal service industry specifically on the continent, and the role that we here in London can play in helping that grow and servicing our clients who are active on the continent. So that's me.
Thank you, and Amos.
Yeah, hi, I'm Amos Wata. I'm from Ivory Coast. I was born and raised there. And then I came to France for higher education, as many Ivorians. And then moved to London about 10 years ago. I had a career in finance. 2 years ago, with my brother, we launched TaxiJet, which was the first cab-hailing app in Francophone Africa. And that was to try to address two main issues: a growing concern around security in the taxis, and also a structurally declining quality in the taxi service in Abidjan. So today, I guess I will be sharing our learnings and our perspective on building a service company in Africa.
Thank you very much. So, just to get started, I suppose the first question that I'll be throwing at you is, what are the challenges and the major challenges to development faced by the service sector in Africa? And you'll all have an opportunity to answer that. But if we start with Sylvia.
I think, I'm in the service industry, and I have been there for the last 12 years, as I said earlier, and it's interesting in terms of how we have seen the industry evolve. When Safaricom was launched 16 years ago, we started off with a vision. The vision was to connect lives. And that vision has evolved over the years because we have realized the power of the mobile phone in terms of transforming human lives. With services such as M-Pesa, and for those of you who are probably not familiar with M-Pesa, it's a service that allows people to be able to share or to send money from one another, and they get electronic vouchers that they're able to cash out at agents and get access to the money that has been sent to them. We have actually seen a lot of people lifted out of poverty because of the free flow and the increase in velocity of movement of cash from those who have and to those who probably have difficulties in accessing the same. With evolution also of the services that we have been able to offer on this platform, we have now begun to offer solutions that allow people to be able to save and get interest on those savings, and they're saving off their mobile phone. I don't know how many of you have seen a research that has been done that shows that there is a higher penetration of mobile phones in the African continent than there are toilets, which just shows just the pervasiveness and ubiquity of the phone. So I think there's a big opportunity for us to continue to develop solutions that really lift up our economy, whether it is in terms of offering solutions to farmers, offering solutions for health, where people can be able to save money for their health insurance off their mobile phone over a period of time without having to go into big insurance kind of policies that are many times very restrictive. And if I then look at it if I look at the world from that perspective, and I ask, what are the challenges then that we face? It's probably maybe lack of sometimes a unifying vision. I wouldn't say that it's lack of vision, because I think at an individual level, everyone has a vision to move ahead. There's a vision to move your society ahead. There's a vision as an individual to move your family ahead. But I think probably what we suffer from, and at least I can speak for my own country, is we suffer from a lack of a unifying vision that catapults the whole nation towards the achievement, creating of the right legislation, creation of the right policies that will help the achievement of that vision. Recently, the launch of the Sustainable Development Goals, I think offers nations such as Kenya or even us as Africans an opportunity to be able to come around our common goals, like how do we reduce inequality, how do we reduce poverty, how do we create a world where there's no hunger. And if we can be able to build those unifying visions that are separate from the political agendas that exist in many African countries, then we can probably be able to spur on the service economy that we want to drive.
Thank you very much. And if I can throw the question at Kweku as well.
Sure, thanks. So I think in the legal space, we sit in a unique position in that we serve the service providers. So we kind of have a view on the kind of things that they're struggling with. And when I think of what the biggest challenges are to service providers on the continent, the first thing that springs to mind is just the fundamentals. So I'm thinking of things like infrastructure. So I mean, I think, a few years ago at the height of Afro-optimism, the stat that was bandied around the most was, 6 out of the top, 10 fastest growing economies are in Africa. The other one we don't talk about so much is that out of the 20 countries in the world with the worst quality of infrastructure, 9 of them were on the continent. And I think for me, that's one of the biggest challenges, because for Derry or Sylvia to be able to provide the service that they provide to customers, you need good roads, you need power, and you need the basics to deliver your service. So I think for me, that's one of the biggest challenges. Ernst & Young recently estimated that we'll need about $90 billion per year over the next 10 years just to plug the infrastructure gap that we have on the continent. So the scale of the problem cannot be overstated. And like I said, I'm energy and infrastructure, so I'm a little bit biased. So I think this is the biggest issue. But I think that the other people on the panel would agree with me. So I think some of those fundamentals, and then beyond infrastructure, I'm thinking about things like the regulatory framework, the legal framework, things that the government can do to enable service providers to provide. Because I think entrepreneurs and other service providers on the continent know what they're doing. The environment just needs to be right to allow them to deliver at optimal level. So for me, if I was looking at the challenges, I think that's where I'd start. I think that's the biggest problem facing service providers.
Thank you very much. And Amos?
Yeah, thank you. I think, just thinking about our experience, if I was to think from the least to the most challenging issues that we face, trying to launch a service business in Africa. On the demand side, which would be on the least challenging, there's a bit of education on the customers. And sometimes when you start, you unfortunately don't have the capital for marketing purposes to train and explain the product and how to use. And you tend sometimes to take for granted a lot of things that people should understand, but they don't. But I would say that's the least challenging because most of the time there's a pressing needs. So you tend to see, at least in our experience, we were overwhelmed by, on the positive side, by how quickly people adopted the service. On the supply side, just to beef up a bit on what he said, I think there's, at least from our perspective, there's three challenges we faced. The first challenge, at least being a startup, was what in the jargon people would call dependencies. So just to give you an example, we launched in August 15. We're supposed to launch in May. And a critical part of our entire value proposition is based on access to data. So we say we're not going to take a risk. So we're going to rent, I will not say this operator names here, but we're going to rent part of his network. So they have this service where you rent part of the network. It's called an APN. And so you have specific access to the network, and it gives you high quality in terms of data. So from May to July, the whole network was shut down for maintenance. So you depend on services sometimes. There's nothing to do with your service, but for one reason or another, from time to time it could work, for other time it couldn't work. Another challenge in terms of dependencies was we integrated in our platform the payment with mobile money. And unfortunately, sometimes those platforms don't work. They shut down. So yeah, it could be 2 days, 3 days, and unfortunately, sometimes the back end of those services is not based on the continent. So you can call the guy and shout as much as you want on him, but there's nothing he can do. He has to wait until Monday where he can call somebody in another part of the world to try to figure that out. And in the meantime, your business is shut down and you have clients calling you and being extremely pissed. So the first thing is on the dependencies. The second challenge is on financing. So my background is finance. All my career, I've been a professional investor. I've invested in companies. I've structured deals in Europe, in the US. So I thought I knew how to structure things. And so let me tell you this very nice story. So We own a fleet, let's call it, it's worth maybe 1.5 million euros. And so we had from time to time a working capital need, right? And so we will call on investors and say, oh, we need 5,000 euro because there's this gap, we need to pay for the fuel and to keep the business going. So my brother was the CEO, and I had a chat and say, no, it's not acceptable. Just go to the bank and ask for a revolver. You know, they grant you a revolver for 100,000 euro or whatever. I mean, you have the asset there, you can pledge them and, you know, they should feel secure. So the bank said, okay, we're happy to consider that. So we'll give you the revolver, you pledge all the cars, you put 100,000 euros in a bank account that we lock. You give a personal guarantee, and we need some of your main shareholders to provide personal guarantees as well. And then I said, okay, can you give me this guy's number? I need to have a chat with him. Say, okay, you're asking us to give you 100,000 euros so that you can provide us with a 100,000 euro line. and then on the back of that, you want a pledge on the car, you want my brother to give you a personal guarantee, and you're asking for shareholders to give you a personal guarantee as well? Say, yeah, that's the way we do business here. Okay, that's an interesting way. So that's another challenge in terms of making sure that this financing adapted for different stage of businesses on the continent. The first challenge, I said, is on the human capital side. I mean, on the human, the third one. Okay. On the supply side will be on the human capital side, is from what we learned. So what we've seen is you have a lot of young, eager guys, happy to really run the 1,000 mile, but unfortunately, they don't always have the training. Like, they could have the degree, but they don't have the training. Like, if you were to start a business here, just call a few headhunters or through your network. There's always a guy that went to a school, did an internship somewhere, he learned how to work in the professional capacity. And sometimes this is lacking on the continent. And again, we tend sometimes, just on the face of it, to take a lot of things for granted. I'll tell you another story.
Just before...
Okay.
Before we go into the second story, I want to give...
Okay, I'll keep the story for later then.
Okay, yeah. Want to give Deridine an opportunity to also answer the question, and if you can just quickly outline to us the major challenges facing development of the service sector in Africa.
Right. So they've said, I mean, a lot of things, and I want to add that one of the key challenges that we face is our services are very heterogeneous. You can't, for example, conduct your service across countries in Africa so easily. And that is majorly because of the same things that they spoke about, and also technology. So we've not been able to put together technology frameworks that makes it easy for me to do business in, for example, in Kenya, whilst I'm sitting in Ghana, or that makes it easy for me to, for example, push my service or make my service accessible in Kenya, whilst I'm still in Ghana. So, for example, if I want to connect to Safaricom, for example, it's not that straightforward. Yeah. It's not going to be easy. We can't conduct it on the phone. I have to travel to, for example, to Kenya to get that conversation done. And traveling to Kenya in Ghana is quite easy, but from probably other countries in Africa might not be easy. So that's one, the heterogeneity of the way our services are modeled. The other thing is we also don't have frameworks that powers the level of service delivery. So we've not defined any proper frameworks that are benchmarks or that or let me put it this way, SLAs. We don't have proper SLAs within our service framework. And this is majorly due to the way our unique attributes are as a people. We have very high-end bureaucracies that sometimes makes it so difficult, to harmonize frameworks, because everybody would like to do things their own way. We have issues around, for example, data. If you come to Ghana, for example, every department of government that is responsible for the citizen has its own database. So we don't have a common data infrastructure that service providers can leverage. So you have to, for example, talk to every department have different conversations, pay different bills, have different bureaucracies. And that for me is very difficult, because if you don't put such common sense infrastructure in place, what you're doing is you are thwarting the speedy growth of the service industry. Because things that should take you, for example, 3 days to do, would take you 2 weeks, 6 months. And your competitors in other markets will be moving faster than you. So that means that across the world, you can't be competitive, because within your own domestic service delivery channels, you're struggling to even, in Ghana, we say C-top. You're struggling to make any headway. So by the time you realize your competitors in London, in Asia, in China, all those places are far ahead of you. And I believe that, not to talk plenty, these are some of the challenges that we face.
All right. So you talked on lack of collaboration within Africa.
Right.
So I suppose my question is, I know that there are regional organizations. So in West Africa, there's ECOWAS. So what impact do you think that ECOWAS should be making in terms of the service sector?
Right. I think one of the key things that ECOWAS can do is to make trade easy across. For example, it's not that straightforward. Even though I don't need a visa to travel to Nigeria, it's not that straightforward for me to do business in Nigeria, for example. So I believe that ECOWAS can power the process with which we can operate quite more efficiently and also very easily. I also believe that these regional blocks should change their positioning from looking for investment from outside, and reposition by looking at how do we leverage on our unique advantages. Because we have advantages as a people. We have resource advantages. We have people advantages. We have cultural advantages. But what we see is that every blessed moment, we are always looking for foreign direct investment. And that is not pressing on our regional bloc leaders to really look within and say, what can we do to make it easy for the guy in Ghana to be able to do business in Nigeria? What can we do to make it easy to do business between Togo and Benin, or between Togo and Nigeria, or between Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana, for example? So I believe the regional blocks can look at putting in place, and this, for me, I'm tired of these jargons, right? Policies, regulations, because we hear it all the time. The next panel will talk about the same thing. You get it. I believe that we need to really properly contextualize and rightly benchmark. One of the errors that we are doing as a continent is miscategorization of our own benchmarks, or the benchmarks we are choosing really sometimes do not suit us, because those benchmarks were not built within the cultural frameworks that we find ourselves in. And one country that's done well is Kenya, for example, M-Pesa. M-Pesa came from nowhere. It was not benchmarked on any international or any any Western or European or Asian standard. M-Pesa looked within and found that there were key challenges, and then built a solution to fix those challenges. And those challenges have become the benchmark. Every research paper that you read globally has M-Pesa in there. And that's something that we should look at, and that should cut across other services industry in Africa as well.
Thank you very much. So we do have some success stories. If we look at transportation, for example, the Ethiopian Airlines, it's the most profitable in Africa. It's worth $2.3 billion with a net income of $228 million, and that was in 2013-14. And it's growing at a rate of 20 to 25% per year. So it's, speaking of transnational collaboration and expansion, I think we can see that with Ethiopian Airlines. And I suppose my question now to the panel would be, what barriers and opportunities exist for transnational collaboration and expansion? And if we can start with Amos. And Amos, this time we'll make it 3 minutes.
I think I'll be short on that one. I'm not a specialist of transnational transaction. I think today, if I think about it, challenges the multiform, and that, I will start at the point where I got stopped last time, which is on human capital. One of the things I think we've learned is that having 2 problems in Ivory Coast, 3 problems in Ghana doesn't give you 5 problems, it gives you at least 6 problems. So you're compounding the problem. And I think one of the panelists said earlier that every country is different in its way of doing business, in its culture. The customer act differently, approach things differently. So we're not there yet in terms of integration where you could just take a business from Ivory Coast and transpose it in Ghana and be sure that it's going to work perfectly. So you have the cultural difference. There's always a need, I think deep need to have a local insight, which you can't always build from an outside in. And third, there's the regulation aspect of things. And from time to time, there's a national preference, even though it's not said clearly like that, but in reality, in practice of business, you get more challenges as a foreigner in an African country to compete with local businesses. So those would be the 3 things that I would mention.
Thank you very much. And Sylvia?
I think there's a big opportunity. But for me, when I look at it, and even when I think about even the regional bloc under which Kenya falls, which is East African Community, statistics show that Kenya probably exports, one of our highest export countries is to Uganda. But when I look at the relations that exist between the 2 countries, that they're probably not at their optimal best. And if you look at the spirit of Africans, the spirit of enterprise, I think it resonates across time because everyone wants to do better. We come from a background where we have faced many hardships. We've come from a background where we were previously colonized, and we grew out of that and have powered on. But I think what continues to pull us back and stops us from moving ahead is also just the whole political frameworks that we operate in. And politics has a big impact. I know it has a big impact even on our own capacity as an organization to be able to move into new spaces. New spaces could be new markets, could be new geographical territories, could be new verticals that we want to expand the brand into based on what we are seeing customers asking for. Because for me, the view that I have of the world is that every challenge that we see is an opportunity for us to come up with a new business idea to actually address that challenge. But our creativity has to go a notch higher to figure out how do we navigate and how do we move ahead in spaces where you're asked to dance with handcuffs on. It's not easy, and many times those handcuffs are placed by the political environments we operate in. Why is M-Pesa successful? M-Pesa is successful because at the time when it was being launched in 2005-06, the regime that existed at that particular point was very tolerant of trying out a new payment system, in spite of the fact that we had a lot of pushback and fight from the banks who didn't want to see it grow, who saw it as a threat. They wanted to believe, and they created the capacity and the room for the idea to be tried out. So I think unless we figure out, we can have all the energy, we can have all the creativity, we can have all the ideas, but unless we figure out how we get. First of all, we as Africans, I'm sitting here in a panel where there are people from Ghana, there are people from Nigeria. First of all, how do we even do business and have a conversation among ourselves before we even take it at national level and say, how do we assist each other so that I learn from you and you also learn from me, and we maximize the knowledge that is in the room, that is at the table. Unless we get to that point where we are willing to be more collaborative and work in spaces where we can be able to create those partnerships, then it will be difficult for us to move forward. And probably if we do that as individuals, then we are probably able to inspire even those who are in power to create those environments that help us to succeed.
Thank you very much. Just very quick, really want us to speed up this panel discussion so that the audience can have an opportunity to ask questions. So I'm going to have to speed you guys up. So.
Sure. I mean, to answer the question, challenges to transnational cooperation. I mean, I think we pay a lot of lip service to the idea of Pan-Africanism and African unity.
Yeah.
But for anyone who's tried to do business on the continent, I feel like the reality is a little bit different. I mean, trying to do transnational business in Africa can often be quite frustrating. I mean, to give one small anecdote, you spoke about Ethiopia Airlines. The way a lot of those planes are fueled currently is that, ships bring in jet fuel to the port of Djibouti, and then they're put on trucks, and then they're driven across from Djibouti into Ethiopia. And at any one point, you have something like 500 trucks going up and down. So we had a client that was looking to solve this problem and put in a pipeline, which, on the face of it makes sense. And there's benefit there for Ethiopia and Djibouti. But the most difficult part of the transaction was figuring out the cooperation between the two governments and figuring out, who gets paid what and whose name is on what. I mean, it's quite frustrating when you think about the benefits that are clear, but then the challenges would seem minor on that collaboration. So while we talk about African unity, there's the challenges there. And along the same line, I spent some time doing legal work in South Africa, and I found there some of the mindsets that were holding service industries in South Africa from expanding across the continent. So, I mean, a lot of South African law firms have what they call an Africa strategy, and they talk about going into Africa, which I found quite surprising because I thought I was there. But it turns out I wasn't. And if that's the starting point for negotiations, or already you have an issue.
Yeah.
So I don't want to go on too long, but it's those kind of mindsets which I think are counterintuitive to what we think of when we think of African unity and Pan-Africanism that are stopping that transnational collaboration that you spoke about.
Thank you very much. And Derry?
Yeah, so to add to what is said, I believe that then we need to look at the narratives around the things that Africans do. Within our own country, for example, when something is made in Ghana, there's this stigmatizing narrative, oh, this is made in Ghana, right? Because there's this perceived lack of quality and the perceived lack of skill set who probably might have done the job. So there's doubt already casted on the service already being delivered or being produced. I believe that it's time that we relook at how we can drive good narratives around what we are doing. And by doing that, I'm not just saying that we should just take anything that is given us, but we need to more or less have some empathy towards the services that are being provided and delivered in our part of the world. That is, whether it's coming from Kenya, Zambia, Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, wherever it's coming from, we need to look at the narratives. Let us also expose the kind of things that we are doing. We need to create channels that can actually bring out the things that we are doing so that people can see them. A lot of us here don't know what is going on across the different countries in Africa. We always take our news from TechCrunch or CNN or BBC or anywhere else. We need to start building formidable, strong channels that can communicate the ingenuity and the creative things that we do as a continent. And when we do that, it'll be easy for me to now see what is happening in Kenya and not either reinvent the wheel and then pick a phone and call and say, can we partner because we have a certain challenge in Ghana that Kenya can solve, right? One of the reasons why we have issues is because we don't have proper information flow. So we need to have the right information infrastructure, and I believe that can actually power transnational trade. When we reinvent the wheels, people will look for the right partners, and Africa will be on a very good trajectory when it comes to its service delivery.
Thank you very much. So, gents, ladies, so far what we have discussed here, we've discussed the major challenges to development faced by the service sector. We have identified the lack of a unified vision. So yeah, having a unified vision, but not the lack of it, but just having that unified vision. We've also identified infrastructure and saying that 9 out of the 20 countries in the world with the worst infrastructure, well, African countries actually make up 9 of the worst 20. And also the dependencies and the financing of the service sector. And also the fact that the service sector is quite heterogeneous and the lack of a framework in Africa. We've also discussed so what barriers and opportunities exist for transnational collaboration and expansion in the African continent. So we have the lack of a political framework and the environment, because of course we can't divorce the impact or the influence that government would make in service in the services sector by the policies that they initiate. We're also thinking of looking at the bigger picture and not getting bogged down with whose name goes what. and also the narratives as well. So speaking well about our services, okay, speaking well about our service, our products, and selling the African product to the world. And we can probably do that by investing in information infrastructure. So it's interesting, of course, as was mentioned, that we would look towards CNN and Bloomberg to give us information about Africa and what's happening, whereas we can think of investing in our own infrastructure, information infrastructure, such as the Arise TVs and the TVCs.
TV,
Pardon? Quessa TV. So there's a lot of it. So we need to begin to tell our own story and market our own services and not allow it others to, or not be at the mercy of others. Now, what I'd like to do is throw this discussion out to the audience. I don't know if there's a roving mic somewhere. Is there someone with a roving? Okay. So we'll start at the very top. There's that lady at the very, very top. Yeah.
Hello, my question is, well, I was speaking to a friend of mine a few days ago, and he's from Korea, and he said, basically this question is in regards to like how it's the quality of African products produced in Africa, basically. And he said what Korea did in terms to tackle that, I think he was talking about the fish industry, they increased the price of fish, and then it started to change people's mentality, because they're like, okay, if it's higher in price, then that means it's high quality. And I was wondering if the same could be done for Africa, even though I'm kind of like skeptical, because I feel like you have China in place and other countries. But yeah, I just wanted to know you guys' thoughts on that. Thank you.
Okay. Derek, can you pick that up?
All right. So price as a determinant of quality. I get caught up in such traps. Whenever I go to buy something and I see something of higher price, I automatically assume that that's quality. But that could be also because of my background. I don't believe that price could more or less automatically imbue in African product quality. And I don't think that the mindset would be across the bottom of pyramid. So we need to look at the culture. Would that change anything? I believe that if we want to drive quality, then we need to look at investing in training, because the people who do the thing are the ones who are going to determine the level of quality. We need to also improve the science around the things that we do. So Africa has so many things like fabrics, like so many amazing things, but we don't have the science around it. And our first speaker, I've forgotten his name, mentioned around how we can do evidence-based great stuff. Non-evidence-based great stuff. But I believe that we need to start adding a lot more data to the things that we do so that we can improve the quality. I don't think price would more or less do it. More science will actually improve the quality of the products that we do or services that we have in Africa.
I think the other thing is also just to consider the fact that price is an outcome. So access to ease of access to market. So if the infrastructure is poor, it means it costs more to be able to get to the market. If the cost of the inputs is high, because probably to grow or to develop the inputs, the amount of money or financing that you're getting from the bank is at a very high interest rate. It also means ultimately that your price is going to be lower. It's going to be higher. So obviously we have to think about price from that context. And obviously then, as we continue to create more innovation in our economies, and there's more disposable income as communities become engaged, then the price factor then will probably not be as prominent as it is today in the production of goods and services.
Maybe if I can add something, we are at the LSE, so you guys are probably familiar with this concept of price elasticity of demand. And you've probably learned that there's two aspects to it. There's the relative pricing of a good, and there's the income effect. One of the things we learn in Ivory Coast is you can build the most beautiful VIP product you want. Nobody has the money to pay for it.
Yeah.
So the income effect is so powerful that you have to solve for, as we say in strategy, the low-cost value provider, because this is where demand is, unfortunately. because there's a lot of field sector where salaries hasn't been increased for the past 10, 15 years. And there's been huge inflation in the economy. So yes, I know there's this theoretical aspect of sometimes if you want to premiumize your product, you're better on increasing the prices and then people see value into it. We've tested it when we launched 2 years ago. We built a very nice VIP product. There was no demand.
All right, thank you. Quickly, would you like to add something?
Sure. I mean, the only thing I'd add there is, I think we shouldn't underestimate the fact that African consumers are discerning. Yeah? So if you artificially inflate prices with the idea that it's going to imbue some sort of quality, I think you'll be found out. I think we shouldn't assume that people aren't, just because people aren't wealthy, they're not going to demand good service. So, I mean, that's the only thing I'd add to that.
All right, thank you. Just if you're going to ask a question, if you can first state your name. Okay, if you can state your name and who you're addressing the question to. So we're going to take questions in batches of 3, and then we'll move about. So if you can ask someone, yeah, on that side.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Safietou Sonfo. I'm agri-economist. I'm from Burkina Faso, so coming from Ouagadougou, already just for an academic visit. I'm lecturer. I'm senior lecturer at the University of Ouagadougou. So my question is, how your company help farmers in your country or respective countries? Because I'm from Burkina Faso and talking about Burkina Faso and in West Africa, we know that rural population are among the poorest, you see. And in Burkina Faso, they account up to 85%. And they are very poor. And they don't have services because agriculture is a risky sector. Due to the high rates, there is no finance, banks are not financing. And we are in a kind of vicious circle because you don't have finance, you cannot develop yourself, if your family, and grow the development for your country because you don't have finance. And as you don't have finance, you cannot develop, and you cannot develop, and then you don't have finance. So it is a vicious circle. Then, there's poor farmers, they use, to move from their villages, to urban and peri-urban. And they create some big problem also of the government, of everybody, because you can find some control, settlement, and so on and so forth. So my question is, are you working closely with them how to tackle this problem? If you have some bank match or some pilot project or some success story in your respective country, who work, and then if you can share it with us. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you. And I'll get someone at the very top if you can.
Good morning. My name is Ken. I'm from South Africa.
Yep.
You touched on it tiny bit when you mentioned Ethiopian Airways, but one of the sectors which has been identified as having the potential to have a lot of growth and attract investment is the tourism sector. I'd like just some comments or ideas around how that opportunity can be exploited for the benefit of African countries and for attracting more investment and development. Thanks.
Thank you. And there's a guy at the top with the mic.
Hi, my name is Jerry Sokrari, and my question is for Sylvia. You mentioned earlier on that if we can put aside the political agenda of those in power, we'll be able to achieve more. But in a system that mostly depends on the government in terms of infrastructures, policies, regulatory services, and etc., how do we put aside the political agenda of those in power to promote the growth in our startup ideas or business in Africa? Because I believe our relationship currently with our leaders or those in power is actually one of a parasitic relationship, which is supposed to be a symbiotic relationship. But at the moment, we are not getting much from the government, but they are getting a lot from us. So how do you repair that damage that has already been done?
Thank you very much. Right. So the first question was how your companies help farmers, companies have helped farmers in your countries. I'd like to throw that to Sylvia.
Okay, so with regards to farmers, what we have done, and we've done quite a number of pilots, some have now moved from pilot stage to full execution. is to actually just leverage the data we have. So a lot of times why farmers are unable to access credit that keeps them in that cycle that you so vividly described is because the banks do not have access to the information. And as he said, if the amount of information that they need from you before they can actually give you any access to funds is a lot. And many times a lot of farmers are not able to raise that. So what we do is to leverage the data that we have, because we have data. If you look at telco companies, we know who you're speaking to. We even have algorithms that can actually be able to provide a credit score based on your social media interactions. We can be able to figure out how are you receiving money, especially on the mobile money M-Pesa platform, because it actually demonstrates the velocity of cash that is existing within yourself. And what we have then done is to take this data and collaborate with existing financial institutions to now be able to offer solutions that for those farmers. We have products that we have offered on our GSM platform, on our mobile platforms, where we extend like emergency credit. And we can be able to look at how do you repay us on those services that we offer you as a telco and offer that data to banking institutions. And out of that, then they're able to figure out what is their risk in terms of offering you funds that help you to power on. But also over and above that, there's a lot of opportunity, just even in terms of giving farmers access to information, because that's what they lack most. So you see a lot of middlemen who come in from the city, they go to the farms. The farmers do not know what are the prices that are existing in the markets within the city. They do not know, they don't have access to information. So the middlemen take advantage of that, buy the product at very low prices, and go off and make a quick buck off the farmers' hard efforts. So creating platforms where they can actually go in and query what is the cost of, or the price at which a bag of maize is being bought or a bag of beans is being bought, so that when that middleman comes, you're already empowered to actually have a conversation that results in you not being exploited as is currently existing today. So I can talk to you more about that and probably direct you to some of the products that we currently have.
Thank you very much. And the other question was on the tourism sector, and I'm going to throw that to Amos. We have 10 minutes left, so if we can all, when you're asking your questions, if you can also keep it brief, okay?
Okay, I'll try to make it short then. Yeah, I agree. I mean, tourism is one of those services that are non-tradable, and again, we are the LSE, so you guys know that it's easier to compete on those goods and services because they're local in nature. There's clearly, if I think about my own home country, there's still a lot we could do from a tourism standpoint, and I think the government is working toward that to try to promote that service, try to build the capabilities around that, and we could see now that even the ministry in charge is having more and more clear power in terms of what they can do, how they should promote this sector, which is strategic for the country, both as a vitrine, but as well as an opportunity to create jobs.
Thank you very much. And then, of course, how do we put aside the political agenda?
I wanted to comment on that before. Sorry. So I know it's trendy to say our government are not doing much. I know there's a lot of things they could do, or they should be doing. I don't want to defend any government, but I just want to share my experience, because sometimes we blame government for the wrong reason. If I think about the Ivorian government, which is currently in place, they've done, for example, a lot coming out of the crisis and try to promote private investment, for example, giving tax credit and what have you, putting pressure officially on banks to lend money. But for one reason or another, sometimes those things get lost in translation. So I think my 2 cents on that is, yes, sometimes we are government doing the right thing, pushing for the right reforms, and unfortunately, either we don't know about it because we don't care, or we don't follow the story, or it's too complicated. And secondly, get lost somewhere in the middle. And there's so many things on the agenda that's really, really complicated for the government to track progress on every single item.
So I'm putting aside the political agenda. I think there are a few politicians in the room, so I'm going to tread very carefully with what I say. actually, I'm just going to avoid it at all. I'm just going to speak about from my perspective. I think from where we sit as service providers, and I'm talking both about lawyers and about bankers, I think there needs to be a shift in the way that we approach transactions, especially when we're dealing with governments. I think too often you go into transactions taking up there's animosity there from the beginning. I think like service providers have to see themselves as like the grease for transaction, and we have to bring our clients to the table, and we have to get them where they want to end up, but may not be able to see the wood for the trees. And I think that's a role that across the African legal service industry, I think it's evolving, but we haven't seen that as much. You have often lawyers and bankers trying to get what they consider to be the best deal at all costs, and therefore fighting their corner in a way that may not necessarily be productive. And I think that isn't the same everywhere. I think we can play a role in making sure that when there's a broad framework for an agreement,